Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is the Big Ten preview edition of the college football preview shows here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Well, it's really the Big 18, if you really want to be honest. I mean, it's 18 teams because of this crazy world we live in now in college football and all this relocation and realignment. But here we are with the Big Ten, 18-team super conference, if you will. Phil, this is going to be a fun conference to watch with the new look. The expansion and bringing in teams like Oregon and USC and UCLA. It's going to be very interesting to see teams like that. Washington, teams like that have to make trips to the Midwest, and those teams in the Midwest and, in the East Coast that are in this conference, we're going to be seeing Rutgers versus UCLA. You're going to see like coast to coast football in this conference at times. So crazy that world we live in has a Big Ten conference the way it is right now.
Yeah. It's going to be really weird, man. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. My dad played football for the Badgers. I played at Minnesota, obviously. Man, this this Pac-12, it's just going to be really weird to me, honestly. I just feel like it's college football is getting crazy, that's for sure.
Philip Nelson, of course, doing a great job on these previews and seeing a lot more of them once the season gets underway. We have a time crunch, both of us. So we're going to try to roll through these as quickly as possible in alphabetical order. As always, we will begin with the Illinois Fighting Illini. And, of course, Brett Bielema, head coach here for the Illinois Fighting Illini, really had a strong first year at the helm, but it's not been nearly as successful, I guess you could say, for this Illinois program the last few years. They bring back Luke Altmaier as their quarterback, the Ole Miss transfer returning for another year as the starter. And look, I'm just going to come right out and say it. I'm not impressed. I'm not a fan. Barely 60% completions, 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions last year. It's not the ratio you want to see. Hell, it's not the ratio if he was still playing quarterback Philip Nelson would want to see. So you look at it, I think Luke Altmaier, there's a lot that leaves to be desired as far as the quarterback position. They lose their top two wide receivers as far as receiving yards. So they're going to have some shakeups there. They do have some solid transfers that come in. Zachary Franklin's a really good one from Ole Miss, comes in at the wide receiver spot. So he will definitely help. They only have two starters back on the offensive line. That's something that's a very big concern of mine going into the year. So you look at Illinois, you got a shaky quarterback, interception prone. And is he going to get the adequate pass protection he needs? I don't know if those mistakes are going to go away when you've only got two starting O-linemen and you're a quarterback that's prone and has the propensity to make mistakes. Then on the defensive side of the football, there's six starters back. It's a defense that really didn't play great last year, 29.1 points per game. It'll be interesting to see. They can improve on that coming into this year. I think when you look at Illinois, though, coming into this season, the schedule is daunting. That's definitely something that would concern me going into this. The conference schedule in particular, you look at what's been put out there for Illinois, not the easiest road to hoe, if you will. They do start with Eastern Illinois, but Kansas, even at home, is not going to be easy. It's a very good Kansas football program. Central Michigan's probably a win, but then here comes the tough part. At an improved Nebraska, at Penn State, probably can win versus Purdue. Michigan's going to be tough, even though Michigan's got, a lot of turnover from last year. At Oregon, probably forget winning that. Minnesota at home, Michigan State, and then they end with at Rutgers, at Northwestern. Could be able to win those, but that middle part's pretty tricky. The win total's right around 5.5. Didn't bet it over. Certainly didn't bet it over. I would lean under. 5.5, though, seems about pretty close to where Illinois is going to be. It's a see it before I believe it with Illinois. Could be an under team as far as their totals. They don't play with pace. It's Brett Bielema, the coach. They're going to want to run the football a lot. So as far as game totals, individual game totals this year, Illinois might be a team to bet under. Look for some lower scoring games because I think that defense could be a little bit ahead of their offense this year. Phil, what do you think here when it comes to Illinois?
Yeah, it's a typical Brett Bielema team. They're, weak quarterback play. The offensive line, he historically has had great offensive lines, especially at Wisconsin. I've played against him twice. And they did add some transfers, like you said, to the defense. The 4-star Texas transfer, Terrence Brooks, and then also Ohio transfer, Torrey Cox Jr. So they're gonna rely on their defense if they're gonna stay in games. But 5.5, I'm taking the under. I'm see it before you believe it too. I'm taking the under on them.
All right, Indiana Hoosiers next up, and normally in a situation that Kurt Cignetti who's now the new head coach here of Indiana, finds himself in. Usually there's a 1-year adjustment, and usually you're pessimistic and you think it's going to be growing pains in that first year. It's a bit of a different situation, though. First of all, the expectations are low. Indiana's had some tough seasons. It's why they parted ways with Tom Allen and made the coaching change and ended up bringing in Curt Cignetti. But another thing to factor in here, Phil, is that it's basically going to be the Big Ten version of James Madison this year with this football team. There's
Yeah.
transfers coming into Indiana from James, where Curt Cignetti, of course, coached before and did an absolutely incredible job.
Yeah.
With Madison Dukes.
What, 12 transfers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Transfer portal heavy. And I've said this before. If you're one of the bigger programs and you're trying to build through the transfer portal, yes, you want to add and make your team better through the transfer portal. You don't want to build your entire roster and your entire team through the transfer portal. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely not. I think you want to develop your own guys, teach them, the values and the fundamentals that you expect for your program. I know that he's a relatively newer coach, right? When did he get there? Just this year?
Yes, this first year at
So,
Indiana.
I mean, I guess that's kind of the
Yep.
one thing about him is being a brand new guy. But yeah, you want to develop those guys and keep them in the program. So that's kind of the way I look at it too.
A lot of James Madison transfers, and that's the difference here. Lots of transfers, but they're all from the same program where this coach was last year. I think that's going to be a benefit to Indiana. They can kind of hit the ground running. I guess the only thing you could really question is, are they ready for the step up in competition?
Right.
You're going to a much difficult conference. It's now a conference that's deeper and stronger with the teams that have been added to the Big Ten. So that's going to be the only question. Will they be able to step up in class? But from a continuity standpoint, a lot of players from that JMU team on both sides of the football, they bring in to start at quarterback, and he's won the job, and you expected he would. The Ohio transfer, fellow Canadian, brother of Nathan Rourke, who is now, of course, back in the CFL with the BC Lions now. Nathan, his younger brother, Curtis Rourke, going to be the starting quarterback here for the Indiana Hoosiers. Got to admit, though, it wasn't his best season last year at Ohio. That Ohio offense was a tough one to figure out. They were expected to be so dynamic, so explosive. They had Curtis Rourke back, and that offense just never fired on all cylinders. So he is a talented quarterback, but it does kind of concern me last year, Phil, at Ohio in a weaker conference like the MAC. The offense under him kind of sputtered at times, and now you're going to have to crank it up here in a tougher Power 4 conference like the Big Ten. So that's going to be something to watch for here with Indiana. What I do like is, they've got some good skill position talent. Curt Cignetti did a good job there. Donovan McCulley is back as well to help them out. Now, there are only 4 starters back on defense, but it was a defense that was not very good. It's why Tom Allen got the boot. He's a defensive coach by trade. 32 points per game allowed last year. They're going to have upwards of, over a half dozen transfers starting on that defensive side of the football. A lot of them are James Madison players once again, but a lot of them are really good players that played on a very good defense last year. So I actually think the arrow's pointing up on Indiana's defense. Has to be. I don't think they can play much worse than last year. And you bring in a bunch of players from a team that had a good defense last year, that has the, continuity of playing under the same coach. So I actually think the Indiana defense will be better. Look, the win total is 5.5, and in a normal situation like this, first-year coach at a new program, even though he's a good one, takes over a bad program that's been struggling. It's going to be a tough year one. I actually think they can go over 5.5 and maybe get bowl eligible, this Indiana team. I'm going to go over their win total. I think they're a bit of a bet-on team for me from an ATS perspective, week to week. I think there's going to be some money to be made backing the Hoosiers in some certain spots. And I think they can dream that they could be able to make a bowl game. And it's worth noting, too, they get Michigan at home, which is important. They are at Ohio State. They don't have Penn State on their schedule. They don't have Oregon on their schedule. So, yeah, Michigan and Ohio State are going to be tough. But the rest of the games, look at their non-conference schedules easy. FIU, Western Illinois, at UCLA. They play Charlotte. Maryland's down this year. They got Northwestern. I'm not, Nebraska's got to show me they can finally fucking win some close games. They lose and they piss every game away. And I like Rule, but my gosh, let's win a close game and stop shooting ourselves in the foot every game. Right. Washington's winnable because they're way down this year. Like for Indiana, they could find themselves getting to this 6-win mark, in my opinion. So over the total for me with Indiana. What do you like here with the Hoosiers, Phil?
I agree. I think they are going to be kind of a, betting type team. You're hoping for it. Of the projected 22 starters, 15 are incoming transfers. So that's kind of a big deal. We don't know what they have. But the weaknesses on the offensive line, they returned two, starters from last year. And I know that's going to make it a little bit difficult on the quarterback and the skill guys. But, if they have all these transfers coming in that have, historically won with this coach, I could see them winning over 5.5 for sure.
All right, the Iowa Hawkeyes. You basically had your eyes bleeding last year watching this team on offense. It was absolutely disastrous. Disastrous. I'm convinced that even as now retired from football state, they could have called Philip Nelson and got 10 times the production at quarterback last year for this Iowa Hawkeyes team. I mean, if I have to see Deacon Hill play again at quarterback, it's going to be too soon.
Oh, my God.
I mean, holy shit. I mean, my gosh. You talk about no downfield threat. You talk about no attack in the passing game. And you know what's unfortunate for Iowa, what made it worse last year? The O-line wasn't very good. And they at least would have a good run game. And they'd have some pretty good running backs. Remember Tyler Goodson just a few years ago. And they couldn't even run the football with great productivity last year. So just all kinds of issues for Iowa. 15.4 points per game. 235 yards per game, which was dead last. 133 out of 133 teams in FBS college football last year were the Iowa Hawkeyes as far as yards per game. I'm telling you what, I didn't see the spring game, but there's a lot of respected college football bettors out there that did. Brad Powers is a big name as far as college football bettors and handicappers in the space. He watches every spring game, and I heard what he said about the Iowa spring game. I read the reports following that spring game. The offense looked broken again. It did. I mean, it looked awful. The O-line had trouble. They had trouble getting protection, and Cade McNamara looked wretched. I think it's something I read was 3 for 11 or something throwing the football. And look, Cade McNamara's experience doesn't mean he's going to be good. I know he had going all the way back to Michigan. He's been in college football for years. He had the injury that took him out last year. Can he stay healthy? And even if he does stay healthy, you can't like what you saw in the spring game from him or that offense. So that offense is a big question mark. In theory, you'd like to think, wow, they have to be better. They can only be better. And I think they will. I think if McNamara, with more reps under his belt, maybe he's just got to get more comfortable coming off the injury. I think they have to be better than last year, but there's some people that think they're going to be a lot better on offense this year. That I'm whoa, let's pump the brakes here a little bit. That's an all-time terrible offense last year. Let's see it first, right? Just be a little bit better this year, and that's going to be the key for Iowa, Phil. Just be a little bit better on offense, because if you are just a little bit better on offense, the defense is still very good. They bring back 8 starters. This defense was awesome last year. 14. It's amazing how awful they are on offense, yet how great they are on defense. The polar opposite from one side of the ball to the other. But they have 8 starters back. They have 2 guys that led them in tackles returning, including Jay Higgins, the linebacker, who had the most tackles in all of college football last year. So very big that they are able to get him back on that side of the football. And the good news for Iowa is this year, look, it was a bad O-line last year, but at least you have 4 of those offensive line starters back. You upgrade more experience, more continuity, brings better results. LaShawn Williams is back at running back. They don't have much of a passing game last year, so even though they lose 2 of their top productive receivers last year, it's not like they were lighting it up in the passing game. They weren't at all, so it's not a huge deal. I can't believe how many people like the over, and I can see it 7.5 when the win total was at that number, liking the Iowa win total over, because that defense is going to be really good, and you've got to think the offense can be at least a little bit better. But I think at this point in time, the ship has sailed as far as the value on anything to do with the Iowa Hawkeyes over their win total, because you look at it now, the current number has Iowa 8.5 now. Well, if you like, it is 8.5 on Iowa pretty much everywhere. I'm not ready to ask this team to be 9 wins. 7.5, okay. I think there's a potential there for 8-4. I'm not ready to say with this offense, and especially after the reports of how brutal that offense looked in the spring game, I'm not ready to ask them to be a 9-3 team in a much tougher and deeper Big Ten. What do you think here, Phil? Iowa Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is they have a new play caller. Cade McNamara, hopefully he comes back and does something better than the spring game. But I think the favorable thing, obviously, is the defense and then the schedule. Illinois State, Iowa State, Troy. And then they play kind of, the weaker side of the Big Ten, Minnesota. You got Northwestern, you got Wisconsin, who's, iffy, Nebraska, and then their crossover game, Maryland, UCLA. I think
That's the benefit. They get an easy schedule.
yeah,
There's no Oregon on the schedule. There's no
exactly.
Penn State on the schedule. They've got at Ohio State, and other than that, the schedule makers did them a solid here.
Exactly. So you know what? It'll be close. It will be close.
Yeah.
And I think that they might be able to do it. I do, just solely based on that defense.
I mean, that we've seen Iowa teams under Kirk Ferentz all these years.
Yeah.
They still somehow manage to get to 9, even some years 10 wins with very little offense, but an amazing defense. And they're actually pretty solid on special teams most years too, as well, Iowa. And sometimes that can overcome a bad off. And again, they got one of the easier schedules up and down in the Big Ten this year, which is definitely going to help them as well. All right, the Maryland Terrapins. Mike Locksley, of course, the head coach. He's been here for a few years. Man, I do have concerns, and it's got to start at the quarterback position. Did he have flaws, little Tua, as I like to call him? Talia, Tonga Vailoa? Sure. But he was mobile. He was athletic. He could throw a decent ball. You lose that, and you replace him with, it's looking like MJ Morris, the transfer out of NC State. I've seen enough MJ Morris. I'm not a fan. Not at all. I didn't think that was tremendous quarterback play that he delivered last year for the Wolfpack, and it's looking like he is the favorite to win the starting job. Billy Edwards got some playing time last year at quarterback too for Maryland, but it looks like it's going to be MJ Morris's starting job. Not a fan. What can I say? I didn't love what I saw from him at NC State at the quarterback spot last year, so I'm going to need to be convinced. 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions is not what I fucking call lighting the world on fire last year. So you got to be a little bit better than that. You got to take care of the ball. You got to be more explosive too. Only barely 700 yards last year. What's concerning for Maryland is there's nothing back on the offensive line. Not a single starter returning on the offensive line for this Maryland team. So you got a questionable quarterback situation. No starters back on the offensive line. They do have Roman Hemby returning at the running back position, which is good. And a couple of their top receivers are back. Caden Prather, Ty Felton returning this year for Maryland receiving-wise. But I think when you look at that fact that there's no offensive line experience returning, that's a big concern. And the Maryland offense was serviceable. It was pretty solid last year. So I have the arrow going way down on the Maryland offense this year. Just the O-line's in shambles. MJ Moore's going to have to show me before I'm a believer. On defense, they have 6 starters back. It was a solid defense. The one thing about Maryland is the defense had one of their better years last year, a respectable 23.8 points per game. They have 3 starters back on the defensive line, which is good to see. So actually up front, stopping the run, getting a pass rush, they should be solid. You look at them in the secondary as well. They bring back a couple of key players there. So against the pass, they shouldn't be terrible. Linebacking core is a little spotty, in my opinion, for Maryland going into the season. But I actually think the defense is overall ahead of the offense for Maryland going into the season. But, just with the offensive situation, and you look at what the schedule is, they definitely got the short end of the stick with their schedule. They do open with UConn and Michigan State. They can definitely win those games. But at Virginia versus Villanova, I mean, they actually could start out pretty well. They could actually start out 4-0. Their win total 6.5, but look at what's coming after that. At Indiana, Northwestern, USC, Minnesota, Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, at Penn State. Definitely does get more difficult after that. Win total 6.5. Got to look under. I'm not convinced it's a 7-win team this year, especially with a quarterback that, man, it was ugly at times watching him operate at that quarterback position at NC State. I'm going to have to see it from MJ Morris. Improved production, improved accuracy, improved decision-making. I got to see all of that before I'm gung-ho on what I'm about to see from this Maryland offense. Phil, what do you think, Terrapins?
Yeah, I went to a few NC State games last year.
That's right. You're a Raleigh guy. You know a thing or
so
two about MJ Morris.
And, not impressed. Complete unknown on offense. The strength, obviously, for this team is the defense, and especially the secondary. They were top 20 coverage grade last year, and they returned 3 defensive backs already. And then they also added a very good cornerback in the transfer portal, and Jalen Husky. So I think that defense is going to be what's going to have to hold them in. They're going to be a team that reminds me a lot of Iowa, but the schedule doesn't help them. So I'm going under.
No, it does not. And Michigan Wolverines next up. You're defending national champions, but not a lot of people picking them to repeat as national champions this year. Sharon Moore takes over as the new head coach. Jim Harbaugh going back to the NFL with the LA Chargers. And look, did great work with Jim Harbaugh suspended last year. But now you're in the head coaching role, and now you got to game. Now, Jim Harbaugh, from what I read, he basically still game planned and got all the prep work ready for each opponent while he was suspended and while Sharon Moore was the interim coach last year. Now Sharon Moore's got to do all that shit. So let's see how he does. That's the thing now. He's got to be the guy to do all that. But obviously, you got a guy you just hire from within. You could do a lot worse, in my opinion. It looks like, as far as the quarterback situation, obviously they say goodbye to a very good one in J.J. McCarthy, now in the NFL. It looks like Alex Orji. Yes, that's one of my favorite names in the college football there. Alex Orji is going to be the likely starting quarterback here for the Michigan Wolverines. They do like him, but again, how quickly is he going to be able to hit the ground running with this offense? Especially, there's another team with nothing coming back on the offensive line, and that's definitely something that would concern me. So right away, just like with Maryland, I see a team with no starters back on the offensive line. Right away, I've got to call you at the beginning of the season a down, worse, declined offense from last year. And that's where I see it with Michigan. Even though they do bring back pieces, Donovan Edwards is back, great running back. The receiving core, though, there's a lot of replacement there at the wide receiver spot. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of younger players. So much of their receiving production gone. So much so that the best weapon for them in the passing game this year might be that great tight end of theirs, Colston Loveland, who they like quite a bit and who had a very good season last year for Michigan. So he might actually be a guy that ends up leading them in receiving, because there's just so much questions about the outside receivers on this team. They do bring back 7 starters on defense, and from all indications, this defense looked very good in camp, spring camp, fall camp, ready to keep going and carry over the great defensive effort they had last year, where they had elite college football best 10.4 points per game allowed. Even though they did lose their top 2 leading tacklers, Will Johnson's back in the cornerback spot. They reloaded pretty well along the defensive line and at linebacker. And again, still have 7 starters back overall. So I would still expect Michigan's defense to be very good, but the offense is going to be definitely a work in progress. This is another team where if you're betting game totals with Michigan, certainly would be looking at unders. I think the defense ahead of the offense. When you look at the schedule for the Wolverines, Fresno State's a tough non-conference game. Texas, of course, not easy. Then they have Arkansas State, USC at home. And more importantly, this team has Oregon and Ohio State both on their schedule. Win total currently at 8.5. I have a mild lean to the under because it's plus money. I think 8-4 would still be a pretty good season for Michigan, but I'm hearing rave reviews of the defense. So that's pretty good to hear that. We know how great that defense was last year for the Wolverines. So it's a lukewarm under lean here for me at 8.5 with the Wolverines. Philip, what do you think here, Michigan?
Yeah, I think there's a few questions there, but like you said, the defense is going to really keep them in a lot of games here. I think that's going to give them the offense time, hopefully at the beginning of the season, to kind of figure some things out. Alex Orji, doesn't have to be incredible by any means, but as long as he relies on Colston Loveland, the tight end, I really like that guy. And then he also still has Donovan Edwards, and then also Tyler Morris Jr. So I think they have the weapons on offense to figure things out, and I don't have any questions with the defense. I agree with you. I like the plus money. So I would maybe lean under, but I could see this team winning more than 8.5.
All right, this is the Houston of the Big Ten for me next up. Michigan State, where I love the coaching hire, and it's just a question of, is it such a big rebuilding job that you're just not going to see the dividends of this great coaching hire in year one? That's what you have to ask yourself, and that's what we see here. I love that. Jonathan Smith, just all you have to do, that program was in the fucking ditch, okay? It was in shambles at Oregon State when he took it over there in Corvallis. It was a bottom feeder. And look what he did with them. He got them to be a winning team in the last 3 years, 7 wins, 10 wins, and a bowl victory one year. Almost won the Pac-12 that year. A solid 8-4 last year overall. He just did an incredible job with Oregon State. People were wondering if that was going to be a winning functional program again before he took it over. That's how bad things had gotten at Oregon State. And the job he did there was phenomenal. This is a home run hire by Michigan State. Certainly beats the Mel Tuckers of the world and some of these other coaches that they've kind of swung and missed on in recent years. Question is it going to be? Is he going to be able to hit the ball out of the park right away in year one? One thing I will say: the Oregon State transfer, Jonathan Smith brings him in to Michigan State right along with him. Aiden Childs, he's going to be the starting quarterback. They really like him, and he really dazzled in the spring game. And by the way, he's thinking about all the things most football people think about first and foremost. He was asked a question about next week's opener against Florida Atlantic. He said, I would bet the over in that game. I love it. I love where his mind's at right there. He's got the most important factors in his mind. I love it. Yeah. Comment that went all over the place yesterday on Twitter X. That That's comment funny. By Childs with the bet the over comment for them next week. But they like him. He's got some mobility, which is what you like to see. You look at the top receiver is back, Montori Foster. That's going to be a big thing. Unfortunately, one starting O-lineman back. That is concerning, but it does help that you've got a very athletic, very mobile quarterback. If the pocket collapses, he can make something happen. The defense last year, look, they had their issues, almost 30 points per game allowed, 6 starters back. We'll see, but again, their schedule, when you look at it, they get Michigan, they get Oregon, they get Ohio State. They get 3 of the Big 4 in the Big 10. The only one they don't play is Penn State, so still a pretty difficult schedule. The win total for Michigan State is 4.5, and this is for me. Look, I get a lot of people love the under. I can't do it. I respect this coach too. He's just so good, bloody good of a coach. I can't bet a really good coach like this under a win total of 4.5, even though I realize this could be a tough first year. And I know that at Oregon State, even his first year there, they only won 2 games. So maybe this is going to be a really tough rebuilding year for Jonathan Smith. But he's such a good coach, I can't bring myself to bet under 4.5. So I'm off the win total for Michigan State. What do you think here, Phil?
It's weird to look at Michigan State in this situation, especially, I played against them 2 times, and geez, one of the years they won the Rose Bowl.
Mark D'Antonio era. It must have been, right?
Mark D'Antonio, and
they had some good teams then.
Some of those, Max Bullo, the linebacker. I mean, geez, some of those guys that they had back then. I mean, it's just weird to see them.
Was Kirk Cousins playing for Michigan?
No, they had the quarterback Cooper that Cook, went to Connor the Raiders. Cook? What the heck's his name? That quarterback, he's number 8.
I'm thinking Connor Cook, but
Connor Cook. Yep, you're right. Connor Cook.
Right? That's what I thought. See, I got it. I got that old memory bank. Still working.
There you go. Yeah,
bank is open. Yeah.
But obviously the passing game will improve. Obviously, Aiden Childs coming on over. They also brought over Jack Velling from Oregon State, good tight end.
Yep.
They added cornerback Ed Woods from Arizona State as well. He ranked pretty high on PFF, 76.8 PFF grade. So that should help out with the defense. I think I agree with you. Michigan State is just historically a great team, and they have somewhat of a recruiting hold in Michigan, and there's good football there. So I could see them winning more than 4 games.
Word from the OC too. They want to push the ball down the field a little bit more this year than they have in the past. So maybe some overs, maybe some value at least with some overs in some Michigan State games. I know I'm eyeing the over in that Florida Atlantic Michigan State game next week. So that might be on my card when it comes to next week in college football. All right, Minnesota Golden Gophers next up. This is a pretty important year for PJ Fleck here with Minnesota. You look at this squad overall, and you kind of feel that if things go south this year, they might actually make a coaching change. And look, it's been some good. He's had some terrific seasons here, but he's also had some down years. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes here for Minnesota this year. You look at the quarterback spot, Max Brosmer, New Hampshire FCS transfer comes in. Now let's remember, New Hampshire's been a good FCS program in football. So yes, it's an FCS transfer that's coming over at quarterback, but it's been a good FCS program. He's had great numbers there. I actually like the move going. And look, nothing against Tanner Morgan. He's been the quarterback there for many, many years, but kind of a game manager type of guy. That's basically been what he throughout his Minnesota run at quarterback. That's what we've seen. Darius Taylor is at running back this year for them. The good news is Daniel Jackson, outstanding receiver, is going to lead them in terms of the wide receiver group. They do have 3 starters back on the O-line, and that's pretty solid compared to some of these other teams we've talked about, Phil, where they have Zilch, Jack Squat coming back on the offensive line. So the fact that those guys have 3 back, Minnesota, certainly helps them. A lot back on defense. I think that's definitely the thing that where you can be kind of excited about Minnesota coming into the year, is that they bring back a lot on defense. It's a group that has the potential to be better on that side of the football while they let Brosmer and the offense develop a little bit. As far as the schedule goes for this Minnesota team, that's a big game for both teams. North Carolina, Minnesota next Thursday night.
Yeah.
North Carolina, there's talk that if things don't go well, they're going to say, enjoy retirement to Mac Brown, after this season. There's talk of Minnesota has a tough year. Maybe they part ways with Fleck. So it's a big game for both of those teams, both of those coaches. Then they host Rhode Island. Then they host Nevada. Then they host Iowa. I mean, they could honestly start 3-1 or 4-0 Minnesota.
Yeah.
Then it gets tough at Michigan, USC, at UCLA. Maryland, though, at home, they should win. At Illinois, they can win. At Rutgers, they can win. And then they have a tough finish. Home Penn State, road Wisconsin. That being said, the win total is only 5.5 plus 100. I kind of lean over because I think the defense could be solid, if not really good. The offense, there's some questions, especially, but they do have the 3 starters back. I think there's more winnable games on their schedule than some people think. So 5.5, especially at plus 100. I'll go over 5.5 here with the Gophers. What do you think here, Phil?
Yeah, I'm going over as well. I think, when you have a strong run game and a good defense that keeps you in games in the Big Ten, that's just the way it is. I know from experience. But yeah, having Darius Taylor and Jordan Nubbin, the true freshman from last year, I think those two are going to, kind of lead the rushing attack. Hopefully Brosmer can figure it out a little bit. Obviously he's transitioning from the transitioning to the FBS. So, hopefully he can, kind of figure things out early on with that schedule. They do return 4 starting offensive linemen as well. So I think, that's obviously going to help. But yeah, that defense should be able to keep them in games. And I would strongly lean on the over here.
It's all about the schedule, and I think there's a chance they get to 6 with what they've got. I mean, they could get off to a really good start, especially if they win that first game at home against North Carolina next Thursday. Nebraska Cornhuskers. So their win total is 7.5, and we're talking about a team that's had a hard time winning 8 games, obviously, over the years. There's no question, but there's a lot of talent on this team. I can't deny that. Like Matt Rule is bringing in the talent here. And it starts with their starting quarterback this year, the 5-star freshman, Dylan Raiola. They really like him. He's looked really good in camp. Incredible numbers in high school. Ready to start, they say, even though as a true freshman. They really like him. There's no doubt. You look at the offensive line, 3 starters back. They're in better shape there. And that's an O-line that's had their share of issues. But they get a majority of their best receivers back and most productive, Jalen Lloyd. The great tight end, Tommy Fedone. You've got some good transfers at Wake Forest, Texas transfer coming in at receiver. So they have some weapons to work with. The defense improved significantly under Matt Rule last year for Nebraska, and that was important. And that's what you'd expect because Matt Rule's had some pretty good defenses going back to when he was at Temple and when he was at Baylor. You want to know how good of a coach I still think Matt Rule is? And at the call, forget Carolina in the NFL. Just didn't go well. I get it. Sometimes maybe he's just a college coach. He's just better cut out to be successful in college. But in college football, he's had good defenses, Temple and Baylor in the past. 18.3 points per game. They got their leading tackler back. The secondary should be solid. I understand the case for Nebraska people liking them, but liking them now to be 8-4 or better, I don't know if I'm there yet. I just don't, because this is Nebraska and this is a team that shot themselves in the foot. And even with Rule here, after the disaster that was Scott Frost in that era, they haven't extricated themselves from these mind-numbing, brainless mistakes, Philip, in their games.
Yeah.
Turnovers, bad penalties, costly turnovers at the worst times possible, which cost them football games over and over again. It's just a bad thing to have in your DNA, and it's almost like I need to see them shake out of that before I'm ready to bet them over their win total. Now, I will say this from a schedule perspective. At Ohio State will be tough. At Iowa will be tough. At USC will be tough. But at least there is no Oregon. There is no Penn State on Nebraska's schedule this year. So it's one of those deals. I've got to lean under. I've got to see it before I believe it. I know the talent is as good as it's been in Nebraska in a very long time this season. They love this Raiola kid, but he's still a freshman. Let's see how he does. What do you think here, Phil, Nebraska?
Yeah, I'm not going to put, too much merit in, a true freshman and then just Matt Rule. Historically, you're right. Matt Rule teams just, aren't super disciplined. And, it's been following him around a little bit with late game penalties, just dumb mistakes. So between those two things, but yeah, the talent, obviously Jamal Banks out of Wake Forest, and then Isaiah New York from Texas. I think they're going to have the weapons. They should be good up front, but yeah, I'm not going to go over here. I think I need to see, the freshman kind of prove himself a little bit more and see what Rule can do as well. So I'm going to lean under here too.
All right, Northwestern Wildcats. You want to talk about one of the unbelievable coaching jobs that not enough people are talking about from last year, what David Braun did in the wake of the Pat Fitzgerald scandal and all that stuff going on.
Yeah.
And everyone just bolted once the Pat Fitzgerald knew, and that was controversial. There's a lot of people that stuck up and stood up for Pat Fitzgerald, but he was still dismissed based on the rumblings of mistreatment and all that. And then David Braun's got to pick up the pieces, and to bring Northwestern to the kind of season they had last year. It's really unbelievable what they did to get that team to 8-5 overall. Incredible work, and a bowl victory against Utah as well. So, I mean, just an unbelievable job. But there was a lot of good fortune in that for Northwestern. They won a lot of coin flip games. There were games when they got badly out-yarded. They lost the total yardage battle in some of the games they won. There's a lot of things that point to, yes, it was a tremendous effort by the team, but a lot of it, there's some good fortune involved. We'll see if they can back that up, because that was a tremendous year. It looks like for Northwestern this year, it's going to be, I think Mike Wright has won the job. Let me just see if it looks like it's going to be Mike Wright. It doesn't surprise me. I don't think Ryan Helinski, who we've seen a little bit of, is number one caliber. He's okay, but Mike Wright coming in from Mississippi State. I understand why he won the job. He's probably the better option. Now, he's a guy that's mobile, but he's always had accuracy issues. This guy's been around a long time, so can he be more accurate with the football is the big question. I think he was with Vanderbilt even a long time ago.
Vanderbilt and Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean, he's been around a long time, and sometimes you just don't get better, you get worse. Just ask JT Daniels, where you start at Georgia and you end up at Rice. So it's just that's the way it goes sometimes. Cam Porter back at running back. They do have their top returning receiver, Bryce Kurtz, back. Only 2 starters on the O-line. You don't love that. The defense was remarkably decent and solid last year. 22.8 points per game, 6 starters back. Problem is, there's a lot of people gone from that team last year. I'm going to have to see it from Mike Wright before I'm ready to believe it, even if he might be a slight upgrade from Ryan Helinski. And then the schedule that they've got, Ohio State, Michigan on that schedule. The good news is there's no Oregon, there's no Penn State. There are some winnable games in here. Win total of 4.5. It's just too low now to bet the under. You're talking about an 8-win team last year, and now it's 4.5. And I get that I think there's going to be a downward trajectory this year in Northwestern, but 4.5 seems about right. What do you think here, Phil?
Yeah, I agree. Cam Porter is going to be big with this offense again. Obviously, they seem to be a very disciplined team. That's historic out of Northwestern teams. They return veteran wideouts, Bryce Kurtz and AJ Henning. So they have some younger players coming too. So, the line depth is obviously a concern, especially, Josh Preed's transferred at Michigan. So the offensive line might, be iffy, but I'm not a huge Mike Wright guy. I've seen him play a lot, honestly, and I think the accuracy is a concern. But you know what? When you can make plays with your feet, that relieves some pressure of the offense. In terms of the defense, obviously the defense, that defensive line actually did a really good job last year. keeping them in games. So I think they're going to be a good team again this year. But yeah, 4.5 seems a little low, so I'll take the over with them.
All right, the Ohio State Buckeyes, obviously a contender to win the Big Ten this year. The platters, the table has been set for them. There's a lot to like. The defense was incredible last year, second in the country in points per game allowed. They have 7 starters back, all 4 on the defensive line. That defensive line could be one of the best in the country that Ohio State has. They should be able to stop the run. It's going to be difficult as fuck to run against this team. They should be able to get some pressure on QBs as well. The linebacking core is solid as well. Cornerback spot, Davison Igbinosun. Keep an eye on him. He's a good player there in that secondary. Almost 60 tackles from the secondary last year for him. So that defense is phenomenal. Offense was the issue last year. Kyle McCord was checked down Charlie last year. Not much mobility in the pocket. I actually do think he might work out well at Syracuse, Kyle McCord, his new home. But, I think here at Ohio State it was a little too much. They make the change. He transfers out. It looked like Devin Brown, who started the bowl game, was going to be the favorite to be the starting quarterback. But the Kansas State transfer, Will Howard, has beaten him out. And Will Howard's going to be the starting quarterback. And look, Will Howard, he had some his highest of highs. He had some tremendous games for Kansas State, and then he'd have some middling, plodding games, and he'd just have games too where he'd make some questionable decisions with the football. He also had a great run game and a run-first approach at Kansas State that kind of helped him out. They're going to have to rely on that here, and the good news is Travion Henderson is back. Should have a massive year running the football. And by the way, too, they add Quinshad Judkins from Ole Miss to really give them some depth, too, at that running back spot, which should help. Yeah. Obviously, the concerns are what you lose at receiver, including Marvin Harrison Jr., who's gone, but Emeka Egbuka is back this year. They got one of the absolute best receiving recruits in Jeremiah Smith and got him to come in here at Ohio State. So I think they're going to be fine there still, even though you lose a generational talent at the position like Marvin Harrison Jr. now in the NFL. Look, they've got all the pieces. They're a loaded football team, both sides of the football. And as long as Will Howard is solid, serviceable, not mistake-prone at quarterback, they got every potential to win the Ohio State, but to win the Big Ten. But here's the thing with Ohio State. They haven't been able to get over the Michigan hump. And there's a lot of pressure now on Ryan Day. You don't believe me that he's feeling the pressure and feeling the heat? Just look at last year, the post-game interview with Catherine Tappan on NBC after the Notre Dame win. He's trying to fucking go after and attack and fight an 87-year-old man, and Lou Holtz, for comments that he made. You don't think that's a guy feeling some freaking pressure? Yeah. You better believe it when he's having that kind of spaz moment in the post-game press conference. So there's a lot of pressure on him. There's a lot of pressure on this Ohio State team. Can they meet the pressure? I'll tell you what, from a win total perspective, you're not getting a bargain here. This got to be an 11-1 team or better to go over that win total. And the one thing about Ohio State is they got to go to Oregon. That could easily be a loss. They have to play at Penn State. That could be a loss, even though James Franklin has trouble beating Michigan and Ohio State. Those are some tough games, and they could lose both of those. And then they play Michigan as well, albeit at home. I'm not ready to go over 10.5. Could they be 11 wins? Yes. I'm not betting it, though. What do you think here, Phil?
Yeah, look, this is, arguably one of the best rosters in the country. You mentioned,
For sure.
You mentioned Quinshon Judkins coming in, obviously Will Howard. They also added Alabama safety Caleb Downs. Chip Kelly is there now too. I agree. Can this team can they rise to the occasion? Can they fight off these Michigan demons, whatever the hell's holding them back? I don't think that Ryan Day's job is safe if they lose that game this year, especially at home. So, I agree with you. I could see them finishing 10-2. They do have a few tough games in there. I don't know. I don't see it. I'm just trusting my gut with this one. So I'm taking the under as well.
And keep in mind, that Michigan game, as always, Ohio State, Michigan's at the end of the season.
Yeah.
We know Michigan's defense is going to be good, but we know the offense could be a work in progress. What if that offense, by the time late November,
figures it out?
That could be a tough game again, and Ryan Day loses again, and he's out on his can.
And anything happens in that game. Yep. So, if they're, if they already, lose that Oregon or that Penn State game going into, that last game, you know what, it'll be really interesting. But I'm assuming that last game, Ryan Day is going to lay it all out, lay everything out there. He cannot lose that game.
Well, if Ohio State's a 1A to win the Big Ten this year, this next team's the 1B. Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, love the guy. UCF, Oklahoma. Now here he is at Oregon. Just a great addition. And to be honest, there's things in his game that I think he even does better than Bo Nix. And that's, look, Bo Nix is, did a very good job here. But with Dylan Gabriel, there's that ability to make those real tough throws on the run. Bo can do that. But I think when you look at it, Dylan Gabriel's a great replacement. They went out and got him. It was a great job by Dan Lanning to bring him in as experienced a quarterback as there is from any Power 4 team. It looks like Jordan James is going to start at running back. Oregon's usually been a program that can just reload, bring in the next guy at running back. They're fine. Tez Johnson is back at receiver. They bring in Evan Stewart to bolster that receiving core. 2 starters back on the offensive line, but they recruited very well here. And Lanning's done a nice job as far as recruiting in the trenches, the O-line and the D-line. Defense was good last year, 17.2 points per game. 5 starters back. Yeah, they do have a lot of transfers, but these are a lot of good players. I'm looking at some of these transfers. Jamari Caldwell from Houston, Kobe Savage from Kansas State, and they've all got great numbers last year. So transfers, but good transfers, productive transfers, impact players that they brought in on defense through the transfer portal. I like, Oregon's win total's 10.5 as well. If I'm going to look at either of these teams as far as over 10.5, I'd rather take Oregon because it's plus 100. With Ohio State, their win total is minus 150 over 10.5. And plus Oregon gets the critical game against Ohio State in their place in Eugene, which I think could make all the difference in the world. What else you like here about this Oregon schedule this year? They have to play at Michigan. They do play Ohio State, but there is no Penn State. That's big. And there's no USC either on their schedule. So I think of the 2 teams at 10.5 with the best chance to win the Big Ten. If I'm going to go over one of the win totals of 10.5, Ohio State or Oregon, I'd rather do it with Oregon. And I do like Oregon to win the Big Ten. I did bet them at plus 210 to win the Big Ten. Phil, what do you think here, Oregon?
Look, this offense is going to be extremely explosive. I'm really excited to see, how they do in the Big Ten because obviously the Big Ten is, more known for running the football and defense. But Oregon, arguably has one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in the country, with arguably the best receiving corps, top 5 quarterback, top 5 offensive line, top 10 running back. A great offensive coordinator in Will Stein. So I think they're going to light up the scoreboard for sure. What's really interesting too, I saw about this team is all 4 of their defensive linemen projected starters weigh at least 270 pounds. So this is going to be a big defensive line. I wonder how they're going to be able to, rush the quarterback. But in a Big Ten conference that runs the football, I mean, these guys should be able to just plug up holes. So I see them winning more than 10 games. I think they're going to be, lighting up the scoreboard across the Big Ten. I really like this team, and, I cannot wait for that Ohio State-Oregon game. I think that's going to be a really good game.
Penn State, Nittany Lions. This win total's dropped. It's 9.5. This was 10.5 at one point with Penn State and their win total. 10.5, I definitely liked it under. I got to say, look, Penn State, this is another team that's very good as far as their overall roster. They're not that far behind the likes of Ohio State and Oregon in this conference with their overall roster. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, probably as good a running back tandem as there is in all of college football, never mind the Big Ten. They do lose their top productive receiver their most productive receiver. They do have a great tight end, though, in Tyler Warren. He's back. They did get Julian Fleming from Ohio State in the transfer portal. Only 2 starters back on the O-line. That is a little bit concerning from last year. And even though they were 34 points per game on offense last year, Drew Aller at quarterback, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Only 2 interceptions. I give him credit. Very good ball security. But he was captain checkdown last year. They never pushed the ball down the field. Now, they do say with this new OC, they're going to look to be more vertical in the passing game. But I got to see it. I didn't see Drew Aller throw many deep balls last year. Right. Everything was short to intermediate. Does he have that kind of a cannon arm to be able to be successful doing that? I don't know. We didn't see it enough last year, but all of a sudden they're going to try to be more vertical and take shots down the field. We'll see if that plays out. There's no question about it. The defenses should be excellent. They were very good last year. 6 starters are back on that side of the football. And the one thing that would concern me now about going under, now that it's at 9.5, they got to be 9-3 or worse to go under that win total is the schedule, because their really toughest game is Ohio State, and the rest of the schedule is very manageable for the most part for this Penn State team. So 10.5, I like the under. But again, at the end of the day, this guy never beats Michigan or Ohio State, James Franklin. He's the king of kicking a field goal up 42-3 against Georgia State in the final minute. But can he win a big game against Michigan or Ohio State? He has not been. And that's still the noose around this man's neck, James Franklin as head coach. Phil, what do you think, Penn State?
Look, I think that Alar, I think he wrongly received some of the blame last year. I think that his supporting cast didn't do any favors for him. And now all of a sudden this year you're going into the year losing your top 2 wide receivers to the transfer portal, and also losing 3 starting offensive linemen to the NFL. So, I mean, that's kind of a cause for concern there. The defense is going to be stacked. This team reminds me of Iowa. Can the offense keep them in? Can the offense help them win the big games while the defense holds them in the game? So, you know what? I see an under here. I see a slight dip from last year. And you're right. James Franklin he can't get over the Giants. So, I'll take the under on them.
Purdue, look, it's going to be a tough win total 4.5. I could only look under with it. Hudson Card back at quarterback. He's okay, but the O-line's in shambles. I think 1 returning starter back on the O-line. That's not what you want to see in a bigger, stronger, deeper conference now. They lose pretty much everybody at receiver, an entirely rebuilt, revamped receiving core. That's not what you want to see with a very inexperienced O-line, and he still had 8 interceptions last year, Card. On defense last year, this team struggled mightily, 30 points per game. They do have 5 starters back, but again, look at this schedule and look at the offenses. Even with improvement on defense, look at who they're going to have to play. Notre Dame, at Oregon State's not an easy road trip. Nebraska, Wisconsin, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State. I mean, it's just a very difficult schedule. They actually might be decent on defense. The offense is a problem, though, with the O-line totally rebuilding. I could only look under 4.5 with Purdue. Just too tough a schedule. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Purdue, the good thing they got going is returning 3 offensive starting linemen. So, I mean, that's a good thing. But, where will the offense really come from? They just don't have really, a lot of things going on skill-wise offensively. It's going to be a tough one for these guys. I think I'm going to take the under on them as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I don't think they're necessarily worse than last year, but their schedule is absolutely brutal. Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and of course our guy Greg Schiano here, who's been here now for quite some time. And look, he's got them competitive. His players fight, they battle every single game. I think you got to give him credit for that, no doubt. And when you look at this year, they got Kyle Monongai back at running back. They've got some good receivers here. 4 starting O-linemen back. 8 starters back on a solid defense. And look, the schedule's manageable. This is one of the better schedules in all the Big Ten. Ohio State, no. Oregon, no. Penn State, no. Michigan, no. They don't have any of those teams on their schedule. I want to go over, and I know this team is always going to battle and they're going to compete, even though they've been undermanned in the last couple of years. But God, I don't love that quarterback, man.
Yeah.
I don't. I saw him at Minnesota.
Yeah.
The Greek stallion, Kaliakmanis. I mean, I just didn't like it. Didn't like what I saw at all. 14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He's going to be the starting quarterback. That might be enough right there to just pass on the win total. I want to bet it over. They've got one of the easiest schedules in the Big Ten. The team's going to play hard. They always do for Schiano. They're going to be solid on defense. What can they get at the quarterback spot? That's going to determine it for Rutgers this year.
Right.
Phil, what do you think?
Yeah. They returned 10 of their 13 defenders who played at least 300 snaps last year. So defense won't be too much of an issue. They ranked in the top 20 in defenses overall for passing plays. So very encouraging, but yeah, I'm not getting behind this quarterback on this offense. So schedule helps, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this defense can help them out and keep them in games.
And I saw this in the spring. I'm like, geez, my goodness, just give me someone decent at quarterback, and then and I think Rutgers could actually be at least a bowl team and maybe even 7-8 wins. And then I saw Ethan Kaliakmanis show up in the transfer portal to Rutgers. I'm like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
really? But anyway, he's got to prove it to me, that guy. All right, UCLA Bruins. We got 5 minutes left. We'll try to crack out 4 teams in these last few. Look, this is just a dead bet against team for me. I mean, UCLA, we saw it declining, and Chip Kelly heads for the hills, heads for pasture, goes to Ohio State to be the OC there. And that's another thing we forgot to mention about Ohio State. Chip Kelly taking over as OC there. We'll see how that goes. He kind of feels like a coach that was good 10 years ago, not so much 2024. We'll see how that goes. But Deshaun Foster, little to no coaching experience. Let's see how that goes. UCLA alum. It already looks like, with some of the press conferences, he's been. It's an adjustment. Let's put it that way for him. You look at Ethan Garbers is the quarterback. I remember calling Chase, his older brother, at Cal when he struggled at times. I said Chase Garbage, not Chase Garbers. But we'll see what Ethan does here. 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's expected to be the starter. 4 starters back on the O-line. The defense, 4 starters back. But again, that was a defense that had their issues last year. I have to go under. The schedule is brutal. I mean, you've got LSU in the non-conference, Oregon, Penn State in conference play, road trip to Washington, USC. It's just a very difficult schedule for UCLA. Tough transition for Deshaun Foster year 1. I would go under the total. And UCLA is probably a team I'm going to be picking spots to bet against week to week as well. Phil, what do you think, UCLA?
Yeah, they returned their top 3 receivers from last year, so that's very encouraging. So hopefully that offense can, the receivers can help out the quarterback there. They do return only 2 of their 11 starters from last year, and they also lose, their rising star defensive coordinator Donton Lynn, who left for USC. So we'll see if they can, overcome that loss. But other than that, I'm not expecting much from this team.
All right, we go from the one LA team to the other. The USC Trojans also entering the Big Ten this year. I like Miller Moss. I saw enough in the Holiday Bowl last year to think they might be okay in the post Caleb Williams era. I think he's going to be solid. It's a great bowl performance. 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. Woody Marks is likely going to be the new running back starter, transferring in from Mississippi State. They lose a couple receivers, but Deuce Robinson back. There is only 1 starter back on the O-line, but Lincoln Riley teams have usually done a good job reloading on the O-line, and he's such a good, creative, offensive-minded coach, Lincoln Riley, that usually can overcome stuff like that. Now, there are only 3 starters back on the defense, but the defense again stunk last year, 34.4 points per game. It was terrible. Couldn't get big stops when they needed it. I think that defense, even with the lack of returning experience, I actually think, change in play calling, the door's open to be a little bit better. 7.5, I'm not ready to jump to the under. I like Miller Moss a lot, but I got to see the defense step up before I'm ready to buy in. If the defense is even somewhat better, they could actually be a little bit of a surprise and a dark horse here in the Big Ten. But I got to see it first. They should still be really good on offense because I believe in Miller Moss. What do you think here, Phil, USC?
Yeah, I like Miller Moss too. Lincoln Riley, obviously, absolute stud. That's why I transferred to ECU to try to get with him, but he left as soon as I got there, so that sucked. But this defense, gives up 35 points a game last year, and Lincoln Riley just historically.
And the Boers' defenses go back to when he was at Oklahoma too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The one upside is joining the true Big Ten now. The offenses aren't super good. So, maybe they won't need that much of a defense, but we'll see. I don't expect too much, but yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that this could be a surprise team.
Washington Huskies, another deal with like Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. Love the hire. How do you not? Jed Fish did a great job at Arizona. But boy, everybody gone. I mean everybody. It's not just Michael Penix Jr. It's not just Rome Odunze at receiver. They have zip back pretty much on the offensive side. All 11 offensive starters. That's quarterback. That's receivers. That's running back. That's offensive line. There's nobody back. That is going to be a total rebuild and revamp on the offensive side of the football because half of them graduated or went to the NFL, and the other half went with Kalen DeBoer, their old head coach, to Alabama.
Right.
So that's the issue with Washington. Total restart on offense for them. Only 2 starters back on defense, too. They did bring in 5 transfers. Jed Fish did actually okay, the transfer portal. But when you lose this much production, it's difficult to see that you not take a step back. And then in the schedule, you've got at Oregon, at Penn State, Michigan, USC. You do avoid Ohio State, but that's about it. You play most of the other better top teams in the Big Ten. So I reluctantly lean under, but again, I'm not rushing to bet the under simply because Jed Fish is a coach hire that I really like here. But it's probably going to be a tough year one. What do you think here, Phil Washington?
Yeah, I agree. They're just losing so much, so many new parts that need to kind of figure out how they all mesh together. Obviously, that brand new offense is going to be kind of really interesting to see how they reload there. Defensively, they have a few key contributors returning, so that's good. I like Jed Fish. I think they're going to be solid in the Big Ten. What's their win? What's the over under for them?
Washington win total currently at 6.5.
Oh, over all day with them. I think that they're going to do a lot better.
Wow, you like over, huh? Wow.
Yeah, I do. I mean, while you're reloading,
I like the hire. It's just that's a lot that he's got on his plate in this first year with all the personnel and roster turnover.
It is. But you know what? I think that with what they did last year, I think they should be able to reload pretty nicely.
I like it, and not scared to disagree with me. I like that even more from Philip Nelson, because I don't always get it right. Everybody knows that. Wisconsin Badgers, final team here of this Big 10, Big 18 actually is really what it is. Conference preview. Look, when it comes to Wisconsin last year, you can tell the offense why it was what it was last year, up and down, inconsistent. They tried to turn a run-based offense for all these years at Madison into a throw the ball all over the place, go fast with their tempo, and it was just kind of a inconsistency from that offense. Obviously, Tanner Mordecai is gone. He's at the NFL now, and they bring in Miami transfer Tyler Van Dyke. Look, Tyler Van Dyke, he can have one great game. He can have one bad game the next week. He can have one good quarter in a game and a bad quarter in the very next quarter. You never know what you're going to get from him. I was not always impressed with Tyler Van Dyke at Miami. So let's see how he fares here. Ches Malusi expected to be the starting running back. Will Pauling expected to be the lead receiver. 3 starters back on the O-line. We're solid on defense last year, 20 points per game. 5 starters are back. It's a difficult schedule. When you look at it, they have Alabama non-conference play, although they get that game at home. That'll be a great atmosphere. At USC, Penn State, Oregon on their schedule. I'm neutral on Wisconsin. Don't really love it over 6.5. Don't really love it under 6.5, though, because there are some pieces here. Maybe Van Dyke is better and more consistent, less interceptions, less bad throws. We'll see how that goes. But for me, Wisconsin's kind of a wait-and-see team for me this year entering the season. Phil, what do you think? Wisconsin Badgers.
Maybe I'm a little biased here, but I think Wisconsin, they tend to handle their business against some of those other teams, on their side of the conference historically. So Mordecai, didn't really do much last year. He did have a few nice moments. Who knows what you're going to get from Tyler Van Dyke? I do think he's more of a pure passer. But interesting stat, though, when the Badgers ran the ball 35 times or more, the team was 7-0, and they were 0-6 when they didn't. So I think that you're right. Fickell just needs to kind of commit to the run a little bit more, not try to be too much of a spread, force the spread down their throats. Defensively, they tend
That's
to.
That's a Phil Longo thing, the OC. Like he's been a spread up tempo, throw the ball more than run it guy. That's up to him to make the adjustment.
Gosh, I saw this.
That he's never changed.
They were calling them the dairy raid. So the dairy raid there, Wisconsin, that's a bad dad joke. But the defense, they were kind of average last year. We'll see what happens. I'm gonna just take my gut here and just historic Wisconsin. I think they're gonna go over on 6.5.
Yeah, for a program that's had good years in the past, it's been a while since they've had amazing years, but they need to be just 7-5. Do have some of the better teams on their in the conference on their schedule, but I think it's going to come down to offensive fit, Van Dyke's play, and can the defense at least maintain the way they play. 'Cause 20 points per game in the Big Ten last year, but again, a tougher Big Ten this year. So we'll see if that defense can maintain that level of play. All right. I was amazed we even got it through it this quickly, but pretty good considering.
Yeah.
A few minutes later than I wanted, but still got through it in a pretty good pace because we both have places to be in the next few minutes. But we'll wrap it up, Philip. Great job again with best bet for the Big Ten. Where are you going, Philip, for your Big Ten best bet?
I'm going to say Oregon to win the Big Ten. I think that they're going to come in and show everyone, in the Big Ten that, when you have a good offense and a decent defense, you're going to be able to win a lot of games. And, I think that Ohio State Oregon game is going to be huge and key and going to be a fun one to watch. But I just think a powerful offense like that is going to neutralize some of those defenses in the Big Ten. I'm going to take Oregon as the winner.
All right, there you go. Philip Nelson, like an Oregon to win the Big Ten, plus 210. That's one of my bets here as far as the Big Ten is concerned. But my best bet here in the Big Ten Conference this year, I'm going to go Indiana over the win total. That much I like Signetti. That I think they can get over 5.5 wins. You got to lay a little juice, minus 140, minus 150. I think they can go bowling. Indiana Hoosiers. The James Madison Hoosiers, I'm going to call them, because they got so many fucking JMU players this year. Indiana over 5.5 wins for my Big Ten best bet. Great stuff. The next time we see Philip Nelson on the Football Frenzy, we're going to have games to break down in NFL and college football, bets to recommend. It's going to be a beautiful thing. The games, football season right around the corner. Can't wait for that. Great job, Philip, as always. Shout out to everyone watching the show. Hit the like button on the way out. For Philip Nelson, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been the Big Ten Preview Edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.